you.
You're welcome. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. For those of you who have not been physically at our general meetings, my name is Carol Husline, and I'm the president of CWA. You can read a lot about our guest artist tonight, Roland, in our newsletter. But if you know how I open our general meetings, I'd like to find out a little bit more about our guest artists and something about them that makes them tick, or something that's important to me that I find that they have commented on, etc. So tonight, I found a quote of Roland's that I thought was really apropos for our the demo tonight, but also for what's going on in the art world now, and everything that's going on that we're getting used to, kind of. So this is a quote that Roland has made, and I'd like to read it to you. He says, "I'm often asked if I'm afraid I'll run out of things to paint. That could never happen. I've never had a single day of artist block in my life. My biggest fear is not having enough time in my life to paint all the things that interest me. The world is a fantastic place, especially when viewed through the eyes of an artist." That's really good for all of us to hear. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our guest artist, Roland Lee. Thank you, Roland, for being with us tonight.
I'm just going to take a little bit of time here at the start and show you some slides, talk a little bit about art in general, and just kind of get us started with that. So I'm just going to change the screens here for a minute. Let me just show you a few of the watercolor paintings that I'm doing now, and you can kind of get an idea of my direction. I consider myself a landscape painter, and I became that because I enjoyed the outdoors so much. Going to Zion in the 45, 50 years ago, Zion National Park up here in southern Utah. Gosh, we've got a lot of national parks. I love them all, but our cabin happens to be right at Zion National Park. So I literally have spent the last 40 years with that as not only my playground, but also my studio. And so this is a painting down at the Temple of Sinawava area of Zion National Park. This is the last stop that the shuttle buses take you to. This is where you get off and hike up the canyon. Some of you have heard of the Zion Narrows, and the cliffs are so narrow at one point where the Virgin River has carved that. They're so narrow you can't touch both sides, but you can get pretty close down in there. And a lot of people want to come to Zion from all over the world because of that. Well, I'm not painting the Narrows here, because if I painted that only, it would be wonderful, but there's other things to paint. Now here's a view you could see from there, but it's probably not the first place that someone would choose to take a photograph. And so I look for these kinds of things, not only the grandiose and the magnificent views and things like that, but I also want to be attuned to the intimate, the quieter scenes. Now, millions and millions of people come to Zion each year, and I ride the shuttle buses with them up the canyon, and then I get off, and in 5 minutes, I'm by myself. So it's really interesting how you can just find a place to be by yourself. This is one of those. And this is going to be the featured painting for the Zion show this year that's going to be in September, October, and November. This is a little painting up in northern Utah as a plein air painting. I love to do plein air. I love to do studio paintings. I love to have a brush in my hand or a sketchbook. That's what I like. I just enjoy doing all of that. And so this is a small, it's about a 6x9, which is what I usually do outdoors, 6x9 up to about 11x15, usually quarter sheet or under is what I do. And my two sons are in their 40s and they're painting now, and they're doing well. They're doing well, they're selling well and winning some awards, so that's great. It's really fun. Okay, this is a painting up in Colorado. And when I went up there, I was an artist in residence at the Mesa Verde for a few weeks, and went over here to where the Durango Railroad was, and I saw a scene similar to this. Now, one of the things I do is change things a lot, but I call this one Railroad Summit because you've got an engineer and you've got a mechanic, and I say management for the other one, and they're all talking together prior to this train leaving. And so I added the steam along the bottom part, and that because I thought it added some drama, and it did. This has been in a couple of shows, Transparent Watercolor Society of America and Watercolor West, and it's in a new book that just came out called The River Flows, Watercolors Artists of the American West. So anyway, so I go from landscape to things like that as well, but I really enjoy getting some, having a lot of opportunities to change some things. Okay, this is down in Zion, and this is over in Sorrento, off the coast of Italy, and this is the bay that you leave if you go over to Capri in Italy, and everything's just kind of just built right along that coastline. I thought it was a wonderful view. Again, nobody's probably picked this before, but I did. This is something we can see every day out in the deserts around St. George, Utah. It's a high desert country, and some of these old cattle chutes have been around for years and years and years. They look like it, and they're fun to paint as well. It's over in Switzerland, and there's a sort of a uniqueness to the buildings that we see, and over there. And okay, this is a scene up at Duck Creek on Cedar Mountain. Again, my interest here was a summer scene showing the distant trees. I love buildings. I love to paint. These are the kinds of buildings you see around Utah an awful lot. And some of the old houses that have been around for a while. I love the architecture. And again, the deserts. This is just 10 minutes from my house here in the desert. Now, this is a 1949 Ford, and I found it next to some old barns up in near Midway, Utah, at the Plein Air Utah event. And I was born in 1949, and this Ford looks a lot like the way I feel today. But I really enjoyed looking at that. I thought it was fun. I thought it was great. Okay, this is a snow scene up in Pine Valley. So all of these are within, not too far from my home, all of these things. Well, we've got two brains. We've got one for thinking, and that's the brain that we use in calculus and geometry and all those classes that were not that fun. And we can use those to, especially in art. We don't really need the thinking brain so much in art as we do the artist's brain. The artist's brain deals with shapes and values and things like that. And if we use that side of our brain and reach into that, we're using that constantly every day. It works very rapidly. Now, this is what the intellectual brain draws or thinks of when we say, hey, draw a palm tree. Well, it's got the leaves. Anybody would look at that and say palm tree. But what an artist sees when we look at things is more this kind of a thing, which is values and shapes and their arrangement together. Now, this is a sketchbook drawing from when we were down in the South Pacific. And notice that most of that drawing is drawing the negative shapes, just like we do in watercolor, if we're trying to use the transparent method of watercolor. So we've got the palm fronds that come across, and we can see the kind that they are by the little shapes around them. And so all of that is the way we see with our artist brain. And so now I want to talk about a guy by the name of Foster Cadell. He was an oil painter, but he could do both. Well, Foster passed away in about 2013 at the age of 92. I have all these books that you see here, and they were some of the only things I found when I first started painting back in the late 70s. Before that, I was doing commercial art. But he was a big help to me. Now, here's a painting that Foster did. Okay, now I'm going to show you two different things now, and hopefully you can see what I'm talking about here. All right, so when we look at this, we say, if I was there with you, I could get some input on this and say, well, what are we seeing there? Is anybody live that can answer me that question? Leslie, Patricia, are you still live, or am I the only one?
I see a house, a barn, and trees and a shrub, and a pathway.
Okay, great. Now, if someone came to me with this painting, I would say, well, you can draw pretty well. There's just some things that maybe are missing that would help this. If you're trying to draw or paint in a realist way, which means painting something on a two-dimensional surface that looks like what we see in nature. So if we looked at, now what do you see?
Beautiful painting.
That's true. Well, there's some differences here. And now we're dealing with some values and shapes. Now, when I talk about value, you're all competent artists, and you know I'm talking about between light and dark and all the shades of gray in between. Well, what's the difference between these? Let's look at them together. Okay, the one on the left, if one of my grandkids brought this to me and did, I say, hey, you're doing great. That's wonderful. But as you mature in your ability to see and to paint like you see, then you get one on the right. The one on the left has identifiable objects. We all get it. We see what's there. But the one on the other side has more of the things that we see in nature. And usually that has to do with values and shapes. Now, if we bring in shadows into one of our paintings, this is what we're going to see. We're going to see this kind of a thing. And so the difference there is really astounding. If we can pick that up, we're good. Now, one of my grandkids brought me this painting. I would say, wonderful, it's great. You can draw really well. And you can tell that this person can draw, because just take one look at the house and you can see it. So what do you see? Leslie, answer me again. You get to be the person.
Well, I see a lot of hard edges and some kind of, I mean, it's beautiful, the colors, but they're not very, you wouldn't expect those colors to be like that.
Yeah. So you're feeling like the colors might be maybe too intense. The chroma might be too dramatic for what we might see. But there's nobody that would look at that wouldn't say, oh, it's a white house and it's in the autumn and there's a road there coming past and so forth. Well, Now, Foster Cadell did both of these paintings, so he's not ripping on somebody else or anything else, but look at the difference between those two. And let's just examine those for a second. So the left one, the colors are, as she mentioned, they're just too intense. There's no sense of foreground, middle ground, and distance. The one on the right, we have the natural colors. The colors still feel like autumn. We still see the light greens and oranges and yellows and golds and all those things. But we also have the value pattern of the shadows coming through. The darks in the foreground, lighter in the distance, the part of atmospheric perspective that we see and recognize, all of us, from nature. So I want to take a little bit of time right now and just talk about watercolor per se, and then show you a little short video. There aren't very many mediums that are out there, that when you put them on the substrate or the paper or canvas, they move. They just don't do that. And so with watercolor, we either have to say, hey, I like that, or I like what it does, or choose a different medium. Now, if an artist says, boy, I just hate how it does that, I want it to stay where it is, they might be better off with acrylic or oils or a different medium. But as soon as you learn to let that do what it does good, oh boy, we get some wonderful things. And I love the drippiness of watercolor as well as the textural effects. Now I'm going to show you some examples where we'll just use these three colors: yellow ochre, cadmium red light, and ultramarine blue. And so we have the three primaries, but they're tinted a little bit differently. But as they come together, what's going to happen is they neutralize each other. Well, the good thing about watercolor is if we drop the water on the paper and then drop in a little yellow ochre, a little cadmium red light, a little bit of ultramarine blue, and let them mingle and crawl around together, wow, what do we get with that? We get some fun things. So here's a little, Leslie, how well can you see these pictures? Are they coming up okay?
Yes, they're coming up just fine. They're
Okay.
coming up fine. Yeah.
So if we look at the sky in this painting, it's a desert painting, all of that sky, everything that's laid in there, that was all done in 3 minutes, okay? And in oils, imagine what it would take to do that in oils, or even acrylics, which dries very, very fast. In watercolor, we can get those effects. And so I'm going to show you a little bit about that. Now look down at the bush that's in the middle there in those posts. And those light areas, of course, that has to be done through negative painting, or some people use masking, which I don't use. I just use the traditional old transparent style. And so, but what really makes that painting isn't so much the bushes and that, but those clouds that drift down into and behind it and set the atmosphere for the distant cliffs. So if you notice that, now look at a few of these skies. The way we can get these in watercolor is just phenomenal. This is a scene over in the Yorkshire Dales area of England. I've spent a lot of time over there, and look at the atmosphere as you drop back in space. So easy to do with watercolor, and so very, very challenging in oils. I know, because I do oils as well, just not so much. And then look at this interesting sky. This is a little 6x8 painting of the desert. And look how quickly that sky comes together. I don't know how well you can see this one. The sky is very light, lots of color in there. All of these are done with the same three colors: red, yellow, and blue. And I'm talking about yellow ochre, cadmium red light, and ultramarine. Now I'm going to show you a little video. This is a painting from up in Arches National Park. And I'll fire that up now. Now I'm going to work in the sky area, and I'm going to turn my board a little bit. Since all the sky area is on this side, I'm going to turn this around this way, and I'm going to bring some water across this whole sky area. And I'm going to get that wet, and then I'm going to lay in the sky using this wet and wet technique. Now I don't have to actually go around every single edge up here, but I am going to preserve a little bit of light right on this outside edge here. So I'm going to wet this sky area. Don't really have to worry too much about how delicate we are, because it will be lighter and we can work our way around it. But it isn't entirely necessary to isolate the water to this area. But if it starts to puddle and it's getting ready to break out of that, I'll lay it down a little bit, and you can see from the shine in the painting right along this edge. See that water, how it's just beating up against there? Well, great. Now we tip it back this way and let it run back. And we're going to give it time to settle into the fiber of the paper. Since this is 100% rag paper, we want it to be nice and wet, not on the surface, but on the inside, down deep in the fibers of it. So I'm going to just trace this edge a little bit over here, and I'm using a 1-inch aquarelle brush. And once again, we see the beading right in this area. So I'm going to tip it back the other way, and you'll see it run back into away from this edge. Now, once we put pigment into this area, it's gonna stay here. It won't go past the edge of that bead. But let's just let this roll around a little bit and tip it, let it roll, then I'll set it back down again. Grab some of my color and start to work. Just clean that bead a little bit with a thirsty brush right here. And then I'll grab a little bit of yellow, and I'm going to be very bold in my sky today, because it is an evening sky, or at the end of the day, and I'm going to put a bunch of color in here and let it run down into these edges. And a little more red over here, saying, oh no, he's gone crazy with his color. Well, not so much. Not so bad. And once again, I'll let that run around. You can see it running down in here. I'll let it just tip and move. I'll bring some yellow up in this area, making kind of an orange. This will be quite dark up against this edge. So I'll bring it up against there. And whatever goes behind a shape needs to come out again. So I'll bring some of this same red over there, and I'm going to preserve some lights up in this area. But now I'm going to be very bold with my blue, and I've still got my board tipped up slightly, as you can see, and so that the paint will move as I want it to move. So now I'm going to bring some blue in here and watch what happens. I'm not going to mix it on the palette. I'm going to let it mix out here into this paint that's already there, and let this pigment mingle in these areas and make a big, dark, fun, dramatic sky with this. This turns these colors that are already down in here into a nice gray, a strong, hard gray. And I want a strong gray around this edge right here, because this is going to be lighted up on this side, and that'll cause a great deal of drama to happen in there. And I'm going to let this come down out of this side across there, and I'm going to let it run back once again. A little bit of that's going to come in across this area. I want my lines to move into the painting and lead towards the center of interest. And then tip all that back and let it run wildly around and mix together. Now you'll be surprised at how
how much the pigment does mingle and how soft these edges become. Right now these look like lines, but that's going to just migrate. The pigment's going to migrate across there, and it's just going to be very, very soft in a minute. So what we want to do is we want to put our pigments down and then let them alone. Let them alone. Now I'm going to come in here with a little more of my ultramarine blue, and now I'm going to do some blue sky area. These are our cloud shapes, but now I'm going to have a little bit of blue come in, and I'm going to be judicious with that. I'm going to preserve these lights, but this blue is going to come right down against this edge. And then once again, keeping with these shapes that we're doing, we're going to let the clouds part a little bit over here, letting these little white areas come in. And I'm going to bring this down, again, leaving these lights. And this looks very dramatic right now, but by the time we bring our darks into here, this will just settle back. It won't be anywhere near this dramatic at that point. But let's just crawl some of these blues back into it and work away from this edge and come this direction. We're making kind of a fan shape as they crawl up. As we come down along the horizon, I want some more purple shapes to come out of these clouds. So I'm using a little bit of magenta down in here with my blue and coming off. I don't want to cut the sheep's head off just yet. Okay, and see how this has just turned into kind of a dark glow up in there right now. It's not near as strong as it was a couple of minutes ago. Good, it's just the way we want it. Now mix a little blue in here and come down. Make these intervals closer together as we approach the horizon line. Make these intervals narrower. Now I'm going to come up here. I've left some blue up in it, or some blue sky up in that area, but we've still got to bring some of it down and form the outside edge. And I'm going to kind of rough that edge up a little bit and finish this down because I want that blue to come out the other side there. And then I'll just continue that blue down a little lighter as it reaches the horizon. Now that's a pretty dramatic sky. You're saying, wow, I don't know, that's a lot. But once we get the rest of the painting in here, you're going to see that that's going to push down a little bit. Two things happen here. The pigments migrate, and what did look like really strong blues, now that's turned into a very pleasant gray up in here with orange showing through, red showing through, yellow showing through. Gives the feeling that it is the end of the day, or when we start to pick up that color on the underside of the clouds. And that's going to be much more dramatic than what we started with up here. But we've got these lines coming down into it that we've kind of planned in our thumbnail study. So we're going to let that dry right now. And the pigment always dries lighter in watercolor. Okay, now we're going to wait. We just sit on our hands and we wait. We never go back into these washes. We do just this, put it down, let it happen, and live with it. If we sit there and start diddling with it now, we're going to get some oozles and cauliflowers and funny shapes up in there. Then you're going to want to take your towel and start dabbing at it and everything else. No need of that. You know, you can do a little bit of softening later, but don't keep messing with it right now, or we'll lose all this beautiful soft quality watercolor gives us right off the bat. So let's sit and wait for a little while now.
All right, so I think we got everybody in that's in. We've got 96
Oh, great.
watching. So now that I said that, I'm scared.
No.
So, anyways, any questions about that you may have had? We're we're all on mute except for me and Leslie and Patricia. So any questions that you may have about that? I was waiting for somebody to say, well, that looked to me like an 8-minute, 3 minutes guy. Well, I made it a little longer than I should have, just to make a movie out of it. All right. So what I want to do now is I want to come over here and just again talk about one of the ways we see things out in nature and how we can utilize that even back in the studio. Now, a lot of times I'll be painting outdoors somewhere or at a plein air event. All of you have been in those, I'm sure. Sometimes though, you can shoot pictures and you can explore a lot of different things and bring back a lot of material that you can use for paintings later. Well, I do that all the time. You know, I've got sketchbooks that I like to use when I'm out there. For instance, my wife and I have been on various overseas trips with groups of people, and we've had a coach or a bus that takes us from one place to another. Well, I defy you to try to paint in a situation like that. I'm already the last person to get on the bus, and so I don't want to aggravate that at all. But I use my sketchbook and I sketch in it a lot. And then when I come back, I can do some things with that. I want to talk about just a few things, ways that you might be able to use that as well. It may help you. So I'm going to just come back here now to this again.
Roland?
Yes.
Roland, somebody has asked a question in the chat that maybe, I lost it. It said something about, do you always paint your skies like that? And is it on an angle always? Is it on an angle?
Well, you saw
your easel.
Yeah, you saw me pick up I'm going to go back here for a minute and stop this share and come back so I can, okay, can you see me again now? Okay,
yes.
So I like to be able to pick up my board and you know, and move it around. You saw me doing that. Well, I have it on a sheet of well, Gator board or Incredible Art board, whatever. It's foam lined on the inside, it's taped on the edges, and it's pretty hard. And they're so light, and I carry these with me when I go out and paint, but I use them in the studio too. So the answer to the question is, in order to get the paint to move and to migrate together, I will tip it back and forth, up and down. Just as
Thank you very much. Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to go back now over here, and we'll just take a look at a couple of things here as we start. Now, the first thing we have to realize is our objective isn't to just replicate a photograph. Sometimes we think that's the ultimate, or someone in giving a compliment will say, oh, it looks just like a photograph, and they're meaning that, you know, it looks real. It looks real to them. But really what we're trying to do is we're trying to interpret. We're trying to have our world experiences, see things out there, and make our interpretation of what we're seeing. So all the photos can be as a representation of something we saw or did when we were out in Zion or in the Yorkshire Dales of England or the South Pacific or wherever we were. We've been a lot of places. But so what we're going to do is make our interpretation of it. Now that's what I'm going to talk about now for just a few minutes before, let me show you another little video clip and then do this demonstration, painting demonstration tonight. But what I want to do is kind of give you a pattern or a way to work with this. So you're going to, because we've got these cameras now, these digital cameras, instead of coming back with 3 rolls of 24 like we used to do in the old days from a trip, we come back with 3,004 pictures, and we've got to sort through those and find things that remind us of what we experience. So it's not a matter of replicating a photo, but we're trying to just get things to remind us of what we saw so that we can make a painting that dramatizes those things. And sometimes I reach a little bit, you know, sometimes I look at something and I see something else, or reminds me of something else. So we start by looking at those reference photos and then working out the design problem. And I like to do a little value study, a little thumbnail, like 3x5, like on a 3x5 card or that size, and then go from there. So what I'm going to show you now is another kind of a short video. Leslie, can you hear and see that okay?
So I thought right off, let's do a little bit of cropping. Why don't we cut this painting down to about here and maybe about here, and kind of get a situation and just take that sky out altogether. And then I thought, well, let's make something interesting back in here. Let's leave the trees, but let's make it more of a autumn scene. So we've got some lighter tones going back into here, and possibly even let's make a little fence line or something coming through here to add some interest. And as I see this little turn coming back here, that looks like a creek to me. So let's put a creek in it that comes back, makes a little turn, comes back in, and then kind of some weeds on this side and some weeds over here. And now I've got something just a little more interesting. All of this is cut off, but none of this adds to my picture. Okay, so everybody wants to know what colors I have and how my palette works. These are Eldajon palettes, E-L-D-A-J-O-N. There's two of them together, as you can see, they're separate, but I like them because they have a big mixing web. So that's the reason that I like these a lot. Now, I've got the primary colors, but that's really all I use, yellow, red, and blue. But I've got the rest of these colors all as a convenience for me. And so occasionally I can just go straight to them. Right now I've got a lot of colors on here that I really don't use, but I'll tell you the ones that I do. This is Naples yellow, yellow ochre, which is my primary yellow, and I also have some new gamboge, which gives me a good rich yellow, and I've got just a regular cadmium yellow light, or you could use lemon yellow or something else for one of those. I do have some quinacridone gold, although that's changed recently from the original quinacridone gold, and I don't like it as much. But here's quinacridone burnt sienna and quinacridone scarlet. And then I have a color here that I use quite a bit with this yellow ochre for my grays, and that's cadmium red light. Over here I have quinacridone magenta, quinacridone coral. You can tell the ones I use a lot because they're kind of gone. And this is kind of a pink, but this is carbazole violet, and I use that to get my darks occasionally. These are some darks in here, mainly sepia, quinacridone, or sap green. Here's my sap green. And then cerulean blue. And I also have a phthalo, which I use for dark sometimes, but it's a phthalo green shade. And then I've got a cobalt blue and also ultramarine. Now, out of all of those, the ones I use the most are the yellow ochre, the cadmium red light, and then I use this quinacridone coral a lot to create my violets coupled with ultramarine blue. Now those are the ones I use the most. The rest just kind of come here and there, but really with those colors I can get anywhere I want. But I do love my quinacridone sienna. That takes the place of burnt sienna on my palette. The brushes I'm using are not complex. I'm just using some simple Da Vinci brushes here, and also brushes that I like a lot are these Low Cornell. This this brand, you can always tell them because they've got the black handle with the red stripe on them. And boy, look at the point on that. These are synthetics, but they work really great. The point stays for a long time. They're fairly inexpensive brushes, and I like them a lot. Then I have some aquarelle brushes. These were made by Grumbacher back in the day. And I've used these for a lot of years, and they've got other brands now, but this is a 1 inch, as you can see, this is a 1 inch flat, and all of my brushes are synthetics. I really don't use sable that much. It's very expensive. I don't think it lasts very long, but in some cases, I'm sure it does. Some of the better manufacturers create a good brush with that. But I enjoy the synthetics. They're just a little bit stiffer on the brush. They still hold plenty of water, and they still hold a pretty good point, but they're just not as sloppy as Kolinsky sable. So that's basically what I use when I sketch out on my watercolor paper. I use a hard pencil. It's a 4H, and I use just about any brands, but the grading with pencils is H for hard, and the B series are the softer ones. And in my sketchbook, I use B pencils, but on my watercolor paper, this is the brush that I use quite a bit. Okay, that just about does it for what I use on my palette, and so let's get some painting done here. Okay, I'd like to start off and just show you with about a 40-second time lapse this whole process. You can see I'm laying in the background and the lightest values over the whole painting all at once. And then I come in and with darker glazes over the top of that and continue my production and just kind of refine the details as I go. And as you watch this whole painting come together here, you can see that I'm working in that fashion. I'm continually darkening up certain passages till I get to this point. So let's see how the whole painting goes in real time now.
Well, we're not going to see any more of that in real time. I wished I could paint that fast. I could think that fast, but I don't think I could keep up that pace very long. But I love to see how the pigment moves and blends and crawls around. But notice one thing, watercolors dry so much lighter than when you first put it down. As the saying goes, if you get your color just right with watercolor and put it on the substrate that way, it's the wrong color, because it does dry lighter and you will have to come over the top of it again. And that's one aspect of watercolor I'm not crazy about, but I'm used to it. So let me just show you a few examples here, and then we'll start another big painting. This is what I call a storybook cottage that we would go past often when we were over in Kent, England. So I stopped and sketched it one time and shot a picture. You can see there's kind of a, not a cobblestone, but kind of a slate walkway going up to the front there, and then you see that there's a driveway. Well, I'm not going to just replicate that photo because I don't like how everything is in it. I don't like the sky, I don't like the front, but I love the building and I love that roof. If you see a roof like that when you're traveling over in Europe, boy, that's an expensive roof to keep up. Used to be everybody had that kind back in the day, you know, quite a while ago. But now if you have it, you've got some money, because the guys that do that get paid a lot. So in my sketchbook, you can see in the upper right there, I just did that in my sketchbook and said thatched cottage. And I learned with my very first trip to Europe that if I would draw in my sketchbook, I would remember everything. I didn't know why that was. And I still don't entirely know. But if you try to think about when you hear a song like from the 7th grade, it was your favorite song in the 7th grade, and you hear it, you don't just hear it and say, oh yeah, I remember the words. You have this feeling of being there. And it's because when you were there, all of your senses were involved. And when you hear the song again, all of your senses are involved again. And I think that happens to us when we sketch and paint on location. And that is why past artists just continually say, paint outdoors, paint outdoors. It's not the outdoors part of it that's that important. It's the being there and being live and experiencing something that you could use later. So here's the sketch that I did, and you can see the painting that I did below. Notice in the foreground how I made that path quite a bit wider. I had it come off at an angle. I changed the background a little bit, and I altered a few things. I moved the door over where it would be at the front door, move the door where the path would lead to it. Well, you can do that and get away with things like that. Oftentimes, very often, I have people come up to me and say, well, I saw that you did, and it's exactly like the place where I grew up. Well, not really, but to them, the memory is that way. So I would guess that the people even that lived here would look at this, and it would take them a while to, I'm losing my screen here, it would take them a while to analyze, say, yeah, well, the door's different and this is different, but whatever. I shot this out of a bus window in France. You know, when you're on these buses, all I could do is say, stop, stop, stop. And of course, they don't, because you've got to get to the next destination quickly with this big group of people. So I shot this out the window. Well, not the best angle, but I saw something there with the way that door opened down below there and going into it, and the shrubs and the ivy hanging over the walls and the church tower behind. And so I thought, well, what can I take out? When I came back to the studio and found this picture, I thought, oh yeah, that was great. I didn't have a chance to sketch it or anything, but I says, yeah, I think I can make something with that. So I zeroed in on this part right here. I figured I could get all the things in that and leave out the things that were not that helpful. So I cropped it, and this is the painting that came out of it. The little thumbnail study, the 3x5, is down to the left, and then you can see the painting that I did on the right. Well, I added some things, moved some things around, but it spurred my thinking and got me going. So not every one of us wants to change things from a photograph, but I have discovered that for me, it's the fun of it. Why be an artist if I can't do what I want? Okay, this is another. Oh my gosh. Gesundheit. Anyway, so here. Okay. So I decided to crop this in like this, and that's the painting I did. Okay, you can see how I'm just trying to bring other ideas into it and make different scenes. There's a photograph on the upper left, not really much there, but I thought, well, if the window was just moved over and if it was, you know, the ground was a little different, then I took a photo of this chicken coming along there, and then that's my painting. So I feel like the painting is a better solution than any of the photographs that I had. And that's what I enjoy about art, is creating that. It's a little sketch from my sketchbook that I did on location. We passed this little place, and it looked so attractive and so neat. And I just saw it as we're going by on the bus. Well, we stopped about 2 blocks up to for one of the potty stops or something. And so when everybody went to go in there, I ran back to this house and sketched it. Well, I only had just a few minutes until they got back on the bus and left. So I ran back, sketched this, and when I got back to the studio, obviously I had no time to paint there, But when I got back to the studio, then I used a photograph and that sketch and came up with this painting. Okay, a little farm in Vermont. The colors hadn't changed yet. For a few years, we would go back to Vermont usually about the first week of September, about this time coming up to the northern part of Vermont, Lake Willoughby. And gosh, it's so beautiful up there. The red in the trees and everything, but it hadn't come yet when we were there. It did get there eventually, but I did this little thumbnail study of these roofs, and I enjoyed the light roofs and how they kind of silhouetted against the background, and did that painting up there. Okay, now here's one where I don't even know why I shot this photograph, but I remember the place very well. I've been there 3 or 4 times. A place called Grasmere in England, where William Wordsworth lived and worked for a time. So I took this and said, well, you know, if there was just a break in that long wall on the left, if there was just this and that and the other. So I did this little thumbnail study and said, well, I think I'll just make a gate there and let the light come through from the left. I'll make some trees in the background and let the light hit the gal, and I'll put the woman in there in period costume, like it's back in time. And so here's the painting that I came up with from that. That's probably the furthest stretch of any of these, because it just spurred my thinking of what I felt when I was there. And now I did a painting without really much to go from on the reference, and kind of moved things around quite a bit and changed what's in the background there. And so here's another one. This is also in Grasmere, England. And from that photograph, I decided, well, it needs something in the foreground. It needs a little pond, and then when it has a pond, it needs a little bridge. Oh, it needs a little boat. It went on and on and on. And so, but I do think that the painting is a better composition and a lot more fun than what the photograph was. This is in Adair, Ireland. Great looking place. We stayed here. It's now a hotel, and there's a big golf course around it and stuff. And boy, it is one of the nicer hotels we've been in. But I wanted to paint this, but I'm not going to paint those cars, and I'm not going to paint golfers, or I'm not going to paint, you know, it has that old, neat, old feel to it. I want to try to capture that. So all I have to do is take some of that out, and this is the painting I came up with. It looks just like what's there, but the cars are gone, the pavement's gone, some flowers in the foreground, the sky's got that good 3-minute sky in there, and it all works. And then lastly, this is my last one. I say pretty boring photo. It's not that boring. I really liked the rails on the fence going in the background, and the way the windows looked, and some other things. So I took that photograph and came up with this. Now you're saying I'm crazy, and I probably am.
Roland, can you mention what kind of paper you use?
You know what? I thought I went through all of that on there, and I didn't. I didn't get the paper. Okay, I'm using, on things smaller than a full sheet, I use 140-pound Arches cold press. So it has kind of a little bit of a textured surface to it. I usually use 300-pound if it's a full sheet, you know, if it's a big one, but I always use Arches. And one of the reasons I do that is it's very durable paper. I know what it's going to do. I know how it's going to react. You know, it has changed a little bit, but I still like it. I've had some students bring me some other papers, and they say, oh, this, I put some masking on, now it lifted up the paper and so forth. And, you know, I say, well, what kind of paper? Well, it's not Arches. Well, there's a lot of good papers out there, but I am so brutal with my paper. I like to lift and rub and do lots of layers and get some really dark darks in there. So that's what I use. That's a long answer to a short question. Anything else?
Roland, yeah, Roland, there is a question from someone in the audience, Suzanne, that's curious about why a 4H pencil for sketching on watercolor paper.
The reason I use a 4H, that's a hard pencil, and you think, well, you're supposed to use a soft pencil. Well, when I use a soft pencil, it seems to pick up in the paint that I use and kind of makes kind of a smeary gray in there. And so I didn't like that. So I use a 4H because it's very hard. And you'll see when I do this painting now that I'm going to work on in a minute, you'll see that you can't really see it that well. Well, I can see it enough because the lines that you make are at the places where there's an edge. Well, there's only an edge unless there's a value change. If there's a value change, you no longer see the line. The line is created by a value change. No lines really exist in nature. All we see is these shapes created with value changes. So that's why I use that 4-inch pencil. It's just light. It's just a very light mark on there. So this is a photograph that I've shot in Zion. And what I like to do, you saw me use these pencils, you know, a darker pencil and also this, this is actually a Conte pencil. So if any of you have done anything with the pastels, and what I've done here is I said, well, you know, I like a lot of things about this. You know, I like the shapes, they're beautiful. This is the end of the day. The light's hitting directly on these cliffs and it's making making them light up a little bit, but it's really the end of the day so that these shadows that are crawling up the cliff here, in about 5 minutes, they'll be all the way up and you only see that and then everything will be in shadow. So it's not a good time to do a plein air painting because things are changing too rapidly. So this is one of those scenes that you would say, well, okay, I'm just going to capture it anyways and see what I can do back in the studio. Now, as I look at this, can you see that I've made some marks down in here? Leslie, tell me if you can see that okay.
Yes, I can see, yes, I can see that just fine.
Okay, so what I'm doing is down here, it's just all completely dark. Well, I'm just adding a tree and some branches, and I'm going to have those. These aren't going to be light. They'll still be in shadow because they're catching this full shadow that's being cast by the cliffs on the other side of the canyon. But I'm going to have something in here that's going to add some more interest, and probably over here as well. It's going to be a little bit lighter than that. So now this is becoming my 3x5 value study right here. Up in the sky, I'm going to make, I don't know if I can get any darker than this, but I'm going to have a shape of clouds that come across. Let me see if I've got it. Well, I can't find my blue pencil, but let's do this. So what I'm going to have is I'm going to have the sky come up. Again, can you see that okay, Leslie?
Yes, I can see that just fine. Thank you.
Okay. So I'm going to have the sky come up through here. And what I've done is I've just printed out a little a print on regular old copy paper for my printer. I have a very expensive $49 printer from Walmart or somewhere. And now can you see these sky shapes a little bit better? And notice how these clouds are kind of coming in and around, and they're kind of circling around. This is my center of interest, okay? The subject matter is cliffs and sky and trees, but the center of interest is going to be where the light falls up here on this area, and it's going to be a little bit strong. So now, if there are any questions while I'm working, I'll I guess you won't be able to see that, but I will. I'll bring it down every once in a while. If there's some questions, Leslie, why don't you just ask them as we work and I'll try to deal with it, okay?
Yes, I'm looking to see if there's any new questions right now. I don't understand this question, but David Saviano is asking, can you ask him to turn off autofocus because it's fuzzy? I don't know how to turn that off.
Let me
Sorry.
put this down and just see if, does that look in focus to you, Leslie?
Yes, it looks fine to me, but
Okay.
it looks fine.
Okay, he's right. I should do that, but I think I'm just going to go with this, and hopefully my hand won't create too much trouble. Ask Dave if it's going to be okay. So guess what I'm going to start with on this now? Does anybody want to?
Oh, someone else is saying it's bandwidth, not focus. So
No.
the focus is fine.
You think it's my bandwidth? I think I'm pretty good. I've got a good one here. But I'm just going to keep going on this, and we'll see if we can work some things out. Okay. So I've got my water here. I've got my paints. You know what they are from seeing that video. I'm going to start with the sky area, and I'm going to do what I call a 3-minute sky. Maybe it'll take 5 minutes, but I doubt it. Okay. So here we go. I'm going to turn this around and I'm going to wet this whole sky area. This brush that I'm using is, I got in college, which was about 45, 50 years ago. I'm still using it, and it's very unusual. It's pretty beat up, and I just love it because of that. It has little hair sticking out the side right here. I don't know if this will mess up. Look at that. It's just terrible. So I use it for a lot of things, and it's kind of fun. Okay, I'm going to bring this up. I'm doing the same thing. Now we'll see if you can see where I've traced around those cliffs. I don't have to do this always, but I think it's the better way to do it in this case. And I'm going to tip it around now and come down into here and make sure this area is all wet, clear to the bottom. I'm going to go back and forth and back and forth. Now you can't really see very well, I know from where you are, these cliffs, but I'm going to just tip it up so that you can see the, can you see that light? Leslie, can you see the shine where that's traced out the cliffs there?
We can see it, Roland.
Okay, thank you. All right, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here and mix up a little bit of this yellow ochre, and I'm going to bring it out into this mixing well. And I want the pigments to mix on the paper rather than in these mixing wells. So I'm just going to bring some of this color out here, mix it up thin. That's with a lot of water. Mix it up thin, and you can see that there's not much there. I'm going to clear the red out of it, and I'm going to grab some blue now.
Sally wants to know if you always paint the skies first.
I often do, because I can just get them out of the way, and I won't have to come back later and lay my hand in the rest of it to do it. Now I'm going to take some of the yellow and bring it up here. And of course, I'm doing it first this time because I just demonstrated it. Now I want you to see it. Okay. Then I'm going to bring some out here. Now, I'm not painting the sky, I'm painting the cloud shapes. Then I'm going to come in and paint the sky afterwards. Now, I'm going to come in and bring some red into that and see it starting, well, that wasn't very good. See it starting to puddle right up in here. I'm going to want that to roll back. So I'm going to tip this, bring some reds into this top part. And let those pigments mingle together. So now I'm going to get some kind of a, you can see as these are coming down, see where my cloud shapes are going to be. Okay. Now I'm going to pick up this puddle that's coming down in here, just lift that back a little, bring some red into that area, just above it. And now I'm going to come in with some blue into that area. And I'm going to drop that in. And what happens when all those come together? They neutralize each other and you get a gray, but you're going to, if you let it do the mingling, you're going to see some reds and some yellows and some gray work their way through. Where there's more red, it looks more red. Where there's more blue, it looks more gray. But that's going to settle in and create this really interesting kind of a gray. So it's not very specific in. Now, can you see those grays coming together? I hope you can see this. I have no way of interacting with you at this point, but I'm going to just clean that area off right there where it's getting away from me, and there as well. Okay. So what do I need? What do I need now?
Some blue.
Yeah, now I need the blue for the sky. Here it comes. So now I'll just grab another load of blue, a little darker. I'll start at the top and work my way down. Now the reason I do it in this pattern is because now, look, instead of just running, look at how this holds an edge pretty good. So I'm going to bring this blue down. I'm going to define the edge of this cloud over here. You know, doing these demos reminds me when I watched a very, very, very good potter do a demonstration, and I thought to myself at the time, and I better be careful with this. I thought to myself, what would happen if, I wonder if it's ever happened that he's lost a pot right in the middle because something happens. And just not too far later, all of a sudden, his pot starts to just go one side and then the other, and it starts going around funny, and pretty soon the whole thing just collapsed. And he just sat there and he stared at it, and he said, I don't know what to do. I've never had that happen before. I'm going like, oh, great. Now I caused it to happen just by thinking of it. So often when I'm doing these demonstrations or working with a class, I wonder if it's going to all work out, or if I'm going to have a disaster. I'm like, that could. Okay, that's it. Okay, any questions on that? I'm asking all 100 of you if you want to ask a question, but of course I can't hear you, so Leslie's going to speak for you.
Alice is asking if it's ochre, quin scarlet, and what was the blue?
What I'm using right now is I'm using yellow ochre here, cadmium red light, and ultramarine blue. And they always make a nice gray. Now, if you chose a different blue, a different yellow, a different red, any of those things, it would change it differently.
Roland, I had a couple questions. Do
Okay.
you use a particular brand of paint, and also do you stretch your paper?
I don't stretch my paper anymore. Before, I've taped it down using artist tape, this white tape, and it holds like crazy and then peels off pretty easily. And then after my painting's done, if it's buckled, and usually they are, then I will, on my website, I have a video, or on YouTube also, that shows how I stretch the paper afterwards. In other words, I turn it upside down, wet the entire back, and then let that settle in for about 5 minutes, and then staple it down, and it dries flat as just flatter than anything. So that's what I usually do. I just tape it down, paint on it, and then stretch it afterwards, and it's perfectly straight. If I stretch it before, I found that it just doesn't do me that much. Anything else? You asked me another question. Oh, I use mostly Daniel Smith paints. And I started using Daniel Smith 20 or 30 years ago. I can't remember when they came on the scene, but I started using them clear back then because they were telling us, nobody else was really telling us if their paint was fugitive or not, or what the ratings were on it. They were just telling you, oh yeah, this is a great paint or whatever. Well, I did a lot of my own testing at that time and found out that things weren't true, what they were telling us. Daniel Smith started testing theirs. I tested them, found out that what they were saying was correct. And I've mostly used Daniel Smith ever since. Okay, now did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you, Roland.
Okay, now I'm just going to bring some color up into here. I'm kind of staying away from the edge because these are still just a little bit wet up here. And I'm going to put down my lightest colors now. Colors have the properties of color are hue, value, and chroma. Well, hue just means like yellow, red, green, blue. The value is how dark they are. Like yellow is fairly light, and chroma is how intense a color is. Now, anytime you mix two colors together, you're going to change the intensity. No matter what you do, it's going to change the intensity. And so you got to understand and know about that a little bit. Now, what I'm putting down here is just my very, very basic colors and my lightest values. Okay, so I'm going to come right down here to the edge along the bottom. I'm going to grab some quinacridone sienna, which is right here. This is quinacridone sienna and quinacridone gold, which looks more like that. I'm not so sure what y'all can see from there. Wished I could. It'd probably make a difference in what I do. But I'm going to bring this down. And
We can see your palette, Roland.
say that again, Leslie.
We're able to see your palette.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Now, what I'm doing is just getting these light values in here. Then I'm going to come and work my way down into it. Do I have to stop here if these are going to be dark? No, I don't. I can just come right across them. And I'm going to do that right now because I can. All right. I'm going to really bring some dark greens in here in just a second. But I'm going to get some yellows in there first and let this all dry down up here. I'm trying to create a sense of texture as I go on some of these. Let me get this last little part here. I try to get rid of the whites, get rid of the whites of the paper right off the bat so that I can make a better judgment on the colors. Now I'm going to just bring this light, kind of a gray down along here. And this is the distant cliffs up in here. Let's see, right up in there. And you can see kind of where I'm headed with this. Should have planned this better so where you could see that, but I didn't. So let's keep going. All righty, so now we're kind of moving along with getting these lightest values in here. I'm going to go ahead and touch some greens down into this foreground. I'm going to come back into that and really have a lot of stuff going on in there in a minute. But I'm just going to get some greens down in here and get this started on this bottom part. Well, we can still get some soft edges up along the top. And so Leslie, feel free to ask questions at any point along here. This is a good time because I can answer questions while I work. So if you see anything that comes in, or if any of you out there have questions, feel free to send them in and she can pick them up and ask.
I'm watching the chat, and David asked, this was back a few minutes ago when you were at the mountains, the line at the mountains, that it seemed that you were dabbing the line at the mountains. Was that because you wanted to kill the white?
Right along here, do you think that's where they're talking?
Over to the other side, over to the right, or yeah, there and where your finger just almost went, the mountains at the top.
Well,
No, at the top.
really
The
what I
hard
was
edge.
doing was I was just trying to stay away from the edge because it was still moist and I didn't want it to bleed out into there.
Oh, okay.
If I understand the question correctly, that's what was happening.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, now what I'm doing right now is I'm doing negative painting. I have some branches and you'll be able to see them as I bring this down. Bring some darks into this area. Here we go. Now as we get down into here, I'm going to bring this down and you'll see some branches. This is probably the only technical part of this, is these branches that I'm working into here. And
I have another question from Sally Anderson. She says, when you drop the blue into the sky over the yellow, how do you avoid it turning green?
in the sky?
Yeah, when you drop the blue into the yellow.
Well, I added red as well. So I'm adding yellow,
Yeah.
red, and blue together, and that's creating
A gray, right?
Yeah, it's really creating a gray, but we're allowing, see how the yellow shows through here and then the red, a little more red, and then it goes to gray and a little bit more red here. Well, allowing the pigments to blend themselves on the paper allows that to happen. So what looked pretty dark when we were putting it down no longer looks that dark, does it? And the blue we put up here that looked pretty dark no longer looks that dark either. Now look at the variety I'm trying to get in these leaves down along here. I'm just trying to kind of establish this edge and get these darks in, and then I'll work back into it.
Roland, did you go to art school?
I went to Brigham Young University in Utah. I had an academic scholarship there, and I wasn't able to keep it for very long. So that's where I started school. When I got out of that, I applied at Art Center in Los Angeles, and then Nellie and I decided to get married. It was 22 or something like that, and so that kind of put the skids on that for a little bit, as we were faced with the realities of making a living and paying bills and those kinds of things. But that's generally all that the schooling that we had. The rest of it all came just from doing it. Okay, so I'm going to have these darks, and these will be the lightest parts of the darks here. And you can see I'm leaving a few places where branches are showing through. And how are we doing on time? Geez, it doesn't take long for the time to disappear when you're painting, does it?
There's another question, Roland,
Yes.
from Jan. Why are you negative painting the tree branches at this time?
I don't know, just because I want to cover the area. That's a really good question. And I don't have a really good answer for it. But because I want to get color over the whole thing and not leave large patches of white. But I do want to make sure that I've got these shapes right now so that they stay with us through the whole thing. So I'm going to just try to block those in. This will be much darker at the bottom down in here, so I'll just get all kind of color in there. And I should be using a bigger brush. I can move quicker. And I think I'll do that in a minute. And let's get this color down into here. Let's use this low Cornell. Yes, ma'am.
Roland, someone is in the waiting room. Can you let him in?
Yes.
Sorry.
I think it worked. I think we got him in.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks for watching.
So you're painting wet into dry right now.
Yes, this is dry. That's why I'm getting these harder edges that I can only get that way. Now along the bottom here, I'll have these branches go down, and so they'll hang down out of the tree. Now after I've done this, you know, I've really accomplished a lot on the delicate side of this thing. Now notice if you just make a line, like let's say I want to have some branches come down, and I do that, bad, it doesn't look right. But as soon as we show the lights in there, somehow it looks like what we see in nature. The reason for that is our eye always goes, and I shouldn't say always, because there's always a chance that it's not true, but our eye always goes to the lightest lights against the darkest darks. So I'm going to let this branch come down in here. I'm going to finish this off, and then I'm done with this. And I don't necessarily have to draw in the little branches and that. I took one look at the clock now, and I'm starting to panic. So let's get this all in here, and then I want to show you can you see these branches starting to just kind of emerge out of the edge of that paper there?
Yes.
And the darks that we get on there are going to be really, really dark. Now I'm going to take my big brush, and I'm going to splatter down into here. Most of this will be covered up, but I like to build as much texture as I can. I just did that not being worried about the sky because it's now dry. I can touch it and it's staying where it is. Now, can you see how by just establishing this and getting all these lights and middle values down here, it gives us something to go on. We know where we're headed now. Okay, now I'm going to kind of clean my mixing wells out a little bit, just with a towel. I like to use Viva towels, and they're getting harder to find with the COVID virus. And then I'm going to work on these cliffs. I'm going to get the most important part of the cliffs up here at the top. So right up here, notice where we've got, let's see if we can put this where you can see them both together. You can see where these cliffs right here, where we've got the shadow up on this part and down here, and we've got some shadows up here, and then a big cast shadow that comes down and goes up along there. Well, I'm going to try to block those in and kind of move quickly on it as we go here. Get a towel in my hand, and let's work that out as we go. I'm going to bring some quinacridone sienna. Burnt sienna it is really, and get some colors out here that I can grab into as I'm working. And again, I've got a lot of those the same three combinations that I was using. So I'll come up here at the top, and I'll start right up here into this area. I'm bringing some red down. And the side where the shadow's not hitting, that's the form shadows. It's a lot of times it's called a form shadow. There's other names that have been given to those over the years, but I'm going to bring this down. I think it's easy for you to see where I'm working right now. Right out here on the outside edge, I'm going to bring a little bit of yellow, and I'm going to soften this edge a little bit with just clear water. I'm going to come along this side and turn it so it's not really, really hard there. And same thing over here and down into there. Okay. Now I'm going to come back into this in a minute with some other blues. And the trouble with this Zoom thing is when it's done, it cuts you off. And I've only signed up for about 15 more minutes.
Roland, you have a question. Why quin sienna and not burnt sienna?
I quit using burnt sienna when I found this quinacridone. All of the quinacridones are permanent. Not that burnt sienna isn't, but it just seemed to replace it. For me, it just seemed like it replaced the other very nicely. So rather than having them both on there, I've just got the one. Okay, now I will be coming back into this part and working it again. I'll soften that, bring it over. But right now, that gives you the idea of the turn that we're having right up here at the top. Okay, and what I'll do is I'll maybe slide that down so you can see it a little bit as I'm working. Will that help, you think?
Sure, that's fine.
Okay, and then I'm going to bring some more, a little more blue, a little more red up in here. And since it dries so much lighter right now, it looks okay. I know it's going to get darker, so I'm going to just work on it a little bit. Get that edge down, and this is going to come over here. Come up to there. I'm going to come over and get this one really quickly. And while those are drying down, I'm going to come over here and I'm going to block in this big shadow that comes across. So it's going to come up from here. You can see where it comes up from the corner of this and comes up like that and then works its way across. I'm going to block that in really quickly now.
Do you have a pencil line you can still see while you're doing that, Shadow?
No. That's a good question, but I don't. Okay, here we go. Now this is kind of a violet color that I have here. I know it's going to dry down, but I'm going to bring it up. It's going to come right up to here. Now it's going to meet this edge. Come up there, work its way down. Come all the way up here and work its way across. Now I'm going to grab a little more blue into it, darken it up, and bring that whole shape down. All the way down to here. Now warm it up just slightly. And quickly soften these edges along the top, because I don't want them to be quite that hard. Okay, I'm going to bring this down. And you can see that I've got a section over here where I've got a shadow coming down. This is too big of a brush to be doing this, but I'm trying to hurry. So I'm going to get this laid in over here and bring that up and then bring this down into here. And now I'm going to come along this edge and I am going to tighten up. Okay, now you can see how things are starting to come together quickly now. As we start to put these darks in here, our darks shape the lights. These greens are going to be darker as well, but for now, we're going to just get these darks in here. And I'm kind of carefully doing the outside edge. I think we're getting down to our final 10 minutes. Is that correct?
Roland, I don't think it's going to kick you out.
Okay. Hope so. So if there's any more questions, get them in before you can't ask them anymore.
I always, it never kicks me out.
Okay.
You had a question earlier about the greens you use for the trees.
Okay. What about it?
Which colors did you use for greens?
About everything I have down there. You can see how there's never just one green. I've got sap green here, a deep sap green, and then I've got a neutral, what do they call that? The neutral gray. And now let me just get this. And so as I come over, the main thing is I'm starting light and then coming over with the darks. I'm going to soften these edges as they go out. Come back here and pick up some of this on here. And tighten up that part right there. And then I'm going to bring this shadow that's going to come up over here. I guess after a while with experience, you know, I know what I can put down and still alter later to bring things together. Because I was just thinking, as I've got this red clear over here, I can see it there and I know what I'm going to do with it. But I'm not so sure you guys know what I'm going to do with it. And I'm thinking, well, I could probably explain that better if I wasn't stressed time-wise. You just think that you got all the time in the world with a couple hours, and then it's not. We haven't lost that many people, but we've lost some. So that makes me feel really bad. Just kidding. All right, let's see here.
You haven't gone over yet.
Okay. All right, can you see it starting to come together now? So as I'm building from light to dark, and I keep building up and building up and building up. Let's get a few of these splatters up in here on this. And that'll be a nice, feel the nice warm glow coming out of that. Well, I'm going to come over it with something darker that's going to kill that a little bit in a moment. And so, so I got to have something pretty warm under there. Now this whole section up in here, if I do this right now, this whole section right up in here is darker. I'm going to go ahead and darken that. Can you see that, how it's, and then it comes up here a little bit. Now I'm starting to alter those values slightly. I'm going to come up here now and get some. I'm going to build some textures, and all of these cliffs have been formed by the layering of sand dunes and the flow of rivers and other things over many, many years. You know, millions of years, they say. It's hard to think in terms of that. My brother-in-law, who's a geologist, says that you should not think about that as much as you think about the way we can examine the rocks, and we know that the way that they were layered down. And he said, don't try to think about the time frame that was involved, because that's beyond our capacity to understand that. So I'm going to get some of these strata lines, that's what they call these, in there right now as we're working, and build that texture up slightly. Okay.
Roland, you're getting a lot of compliments that you're doing a wonderful job.
Oh, thank you. That helps me.
And it's been a wonderful presentation. Thank you.
Well, thank you. And you don't think it'll cut us off in just a second, do you?
Nope, it hasn't cut me off in the past, even if I've only allocated 2 hours for a meeting.
Okay. Well, it's right now it's almost 10 o'clock here, so where we are, we're a little bit later than you are there. So if I fall asleep in the middle of my demo, you can understand probably. Okay, now let's bring some of this down, soften that up. All right, now let's come back up here and let's get some of these dark shadows that are in this area right there. And I'll try to move along here. And let's come right down here, right at the bottom, where this comes over and turns. You can see an edge here. where this one comes down to about here. There's a little bit of light showing. Let's see, can you see that well enough? If I just lay that on there and come up here and bring this back down, right where this edge is. Clear down to here, and then come up and then over. I'm going to come over here, and there's a little place. I'm sure you can't see it from there, but it spills over. This is called a hanging valley. It was a valley, and then this Virgin River cut through here and cut it off. And that's why it looks like it does. But there's stains that go all the way down right from here. Okay, I'll lift that up just a little bit, and we'll come up into this area. A little bit of texture as it comes down. And then up in here, we're going to darken this up just slightly. A little bit of yellow in there as this turns up over the top and comes back down and kind of softens those edges. All right, how's that looking? Is that looking all right from where you're at?
Yes, it's looking fine.
Okay.
Okay, you're right at 9. If you want to go a few more minutes.
Yeah, let's just take, well, I hope we've got this far enough. I guess I'll have to kind of finish it in the morning. But what I'm going to do down here, just that we can kind of close this out, these are not going to be white. Watch what happens when I bring a tone in on them. And these light places that are here are not going to stay this light. I'm going to have some darks that are going to come in here and trace some edges. See if I can do that real quick. And we're going to get some darks down in here that are this dark, quite dark in the foreground. And they're going to blend back with some of these greens. And we're going to have this kind of a thing starting down in here. So you can see how that starts to change things as far as the down here in the bushes. You see how the dark, we're going to have our darkest darks and lightest lights in the foreground. And let me come back through here with this. We haven't lost too many people yet, so that's good. Okay.
No, everybody's loving your presentation. I'm looking at the chat and they're thanking you, Roland, and they're going to go to your YouTube channel.
Well, thank you. Yes, my YouTube channel is Roland Lee Studio. Okay, so you just look that up on YouTube, and I don't know, I probably have 20 or 30 videos on there, some full length hour-long videos. I try to keep most of mine at an hour. This one that I've got DVDs that you can actually buy. If it's not on YouTube, you can go to my website and see those. If you want to know the colors, go to rolandlee.com/workshops. Okay, so it's just, my website is rolandlee.com and then /workshops. And on that page, It tells a little bit about what I'm doing and not doing. And then down at the towards the bottom, it says download supplies or colors or something like that. So you can download some things from there. I also have about 40 or more demonstrations on my website too. So you're welcome to go to that at rolandlee.com, and on the YouTube at Roland Lee Studio, and also Instagram Roland Lee Studio. Okay.
Roland, Meg is asking another question. She says, Roland, how dark will you go on the shadow regions of the greens to differentiate from the cliffs?
Well, I want these leaves here to be lighter, but not this light. And hi, Meg. Meg's been down to my studio before, so it's nice to talk to her. And Joe Tringali as well. I noticed he's on here, and he's been down in my studio. So thank you guys for coming down. But these will actually be darker here, and this will probably be a little darker yet. You know, you can't go to your photograph and say, oh, I got to go that dark. It's a photograph. You know, how you printed it out, everything, none of that matters. But if you were there, then you know what you've got to do. And I guess, I don't know, I guess we're here. I guess we're out of time. I'm just wanting to just kind of just go really quickly and get some things done on this. But I guess.
It looks fabulous. It really looks wonderful, Roland. And Joe Tringali says we have to get you back for a live presentation.
Okay. Thanks, Joe. Appreciate that. All righty. Well, I guess we're coming to the close of this. I'm going to keep painting, and I'll just, darn it, this is how it works. You know,
Thank you so much, Roland. We really appreciate it. Just to let everyone know, this is his first Zoom demonstration. So I think you did a fabulous job.
Excellent work.
Well,
Good job.
okay. Well, thanks very much. I appreciate it. And let me put this back on.
When you finish the painting, we'll put it on the newsletter.
Well, thank you.
Thank you, Roland.
Okay.
Go back and look at all the chats. Everyone's thanking you and telling you what a wonderful job you've done tonight. Thank you so
Well,
much.
you've been wonderful. I wish I could see all your faces, but this is kind of crazy. Thank you again for inviting
Thank
me.
you.
Thank
See you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you all for coming. Bye-bye.